The Lions return to BC Place Saturday afternoon for their first game since the home opener in late June, which they lost to the Edmonton Eskimos. Their opponent this week, the Alouettes, who the Lions lost 1 week later to in Montreal. I'm joined by province football writer Lowell Ullrich from his home in North Vancouver. LU, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jonathan.
So I wanted to ask you, LU, about the difference, if you're going to the game this weekend or you've seen the game this weekend, what the big difference is between the Lions of late June and the Lions 3 weeks later. Of course, the team has now won their first game last week in Saskatchewan, and it seemed to be on the back of running back Andrew Harris, who had more than 200 all-purpose yards.
Well, I suppose that is the reason. You're right. I mean, if there's any one player who made a difference in one win as opposed to the two losses, it was Andrew Harris, no doubt about that. I mean, it is only a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the season is still young. I still think we're finding out things about this team. And, I mean, that sort of speaks to whether or not they have an identity or whatever it is. But know this, if Andrew Harris doesn't have good games, this team is going to struggle. If the defense doesn't perform well, this team will be going to struggle as well. They got a good defensive performance. They got to pitch the shutout in the second half against the Saskatchewan Roughriders last Saturday in Regina. Andrew Harris, as everybody knows, had a great game and will need to do that again now that he's a marked guy. Those are the differences, and maybe those are the similarities too.
LU, I was actually really surprised to learn when he was named the CFL's Offensive Player of the Week. Yeah, I was surprised to learn that this was the first time this had happened in his career. How do you explain that?
Yeah, you know what? I kind of caught me off guard too. I mean, it's that whole thing, and of course, he was not only named top offensive player, but top national player of the week or Canadian of the week or whatever they're calling it. And maybe that's sort of the distinction, is that Canadian title has always been one which has sort of been there for a lot of players, but they didn't recognize overall outstanding achievement. Well, Andrew Harris has had a lot of outstanding games, and he had one this week on a week in which Darius Bowman of Edmonton caught 3 touchdown passes. So you'd think right there he'd be in tough for that kind of an award. Sometimes they split it up, but because he got one, he got the other and deserved both.
LU defensive end Khalif Mitchell strained his back last week against the Riders. He didn't practice Tuesday, barely got on the field Wednesday, so it's been one of those weeks, and he's a little bit uncertain about his status. You've also mentioned that he hasn't appeared yet on the stats sheet, and of course this is a guy who seems key to the Lions' fortunes. So through 3 games, tell me, how do you grade Khalif Mitchell, and is he indeed critical, from what you've seen, to the team's success going forward?
Well, you know that Khalif is capable of more. We've seen that. I mean, we saw it when he was a younger player. So perhaps, you have to start to ask yourself whether or not age is catching up here, even though he's relatively young in the grand scheme of things. I think what we need to remember, though, with where Khalif is concerned, and the fact that he doesn't have a stat, is this. Though he does not have a stat, the guys behind him do. That's a real important part of this. Solomon Eliminium and Adam Bighill last week had 14 tackles between them. And what that tells me is that, Khalif is taking up blocks, so too is Eric Taylor. But they're that enables the linebackers to do the good things that they can do. So in a way, the defense is working the way the Lions want it to, but surely, and obviously, they want to get more push from Khalif Mitchell. You're not going to see, tackles don't get a lot of stats, but nothing over 3 games is a little bit of a concern.
Okay, LU, the opponent this weekend, the Montreal Alouettes, Saturday afternoon, of course. They have some interesting players in their team. They've got a former Heisman Trophy winner, Troy Smith, of course, being their quarterback. They've got a former NFL star receiver, Chad Ochocinco. We have to call him Chad Johnson again. Which way the wind blows, I guess, is what we do with his name.
Sankweef.
Exactly. So, but who's the key player to watch? Is it Smith? Is it Johnson? Who have you got for us?
Well, if there's a key player for me in this game, I think we just have to go back to 2 weeks and look at what the Alouettes did to the Lions. That would be their defensive end, John Bowman, who had 4 sacks in the game and, as we all know, basically lit up the Lions' offensive line. If John Bowman has a similar game, the game's over. But there are a lot of great players on the Alouettes. I love watching Chip Cox. He is the Defensive Player of the Year. He beat out Adam Bighill for the award last year, and some say, of course, in this part of the world that should not have happened. but Cox has had a great year. He's all over the field. S.J. Green offensively is a dominant threat. All of the Montreal receivers are big, sound 6'4" guys that are going to give a smaller defensive backs across the league, including the Lions secondary, they're going to give them issues. So if Troy Smith gets some time and you start to get the feeling that he's starting to get a clue what's going on in the CFL, he'll take some deep shots. Chad Johnson, Sandween or Wheaton-Roof or however you say it in French, I think he's going to be more of a factor, but you just don't see guys at his side of at his position, the wide side, wide out, get a lot of numbers.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if Kevin Glenn can avoid that sort of sack attack, as you say, that happened a couple of weeks ago in Montreal. Lowell, thanks for joining me, folks. Of course, join LU Friday at 1 p.m. at provincesports.com for his regular pregame live chat. And of course, all the content you need to know, everything you need to know about Saturday afternoon's Lions Alouettes game at provincesports.com and in the pages of the Province.